I never thought I would end up like this, not at my age. My name is Tina Turner. And no, not the singer. Just a regular mom, the kind who believed that raising good children meant you'd have someone to lean on when you got old. I was wrong. So wrong. That night, I walked alone, my feet dragging, my bones aching with the cold that cut through my thin coat. The streets were quiet, but inside me there was a storm. I had no place to go, no room to sleep in. My son and his wife had thrown me out like I was nothing. No warning, no compassion. Just gone. They didn't just kick me out. They burned my things. Everything that carried a memory, gone in flames. To make space, they said, as if I were clutter, as if I hadn't built that home with my own hands and heart. But I had one last hope. Ethan, my youngest, my baby. I prayed he hadn't changed. I prayed he was still the kind soul I raised. When I reached Ethan's front door, my knees gave out. I collapsed against the frame, barely able to knock. My hands were frozen, trembling. My heart raced with fear and hope. The door flew open. "Mom?" Ethan's voice cracked, his face twisted with horror. "Oh my God, you're freezing." He pulled me inside, arms wrapping around me like a life raft. The warmth of his home was nothing compared to the warmth in his eyes. Claire rushed over. "That sweet girl." "Tina, you're shaking like a leaf." She wrapped a thick blanket around my shoulders and helped me to the couch. Her touch was soft, kind. I tried to speak, I really did, but the words were stuck. They clung to my throat like thorns. Ethan didn't push, he just sat beside me, quiet, steady. Eventually, it all spilled out. I told them everything. The cruelty, the manipulation, how Marcus and Lauren had slowly pushed me out of my own life, how they twisted every little thing, took control of my finances, how they lit a fire in the backyard with all of my personal belongings while I watched. Claire's face turned white. Her hand covered her mouth as if to keep from screaming. Ethan's fists clenched. His jaw tightened. I saw rage in his eyes, not just anger, but heartbreak too. "That bastard," he growled. "How dare he treat you like that? You're his mother." Claire stood up, her voice shaking but fierce. "This is unacceptable. We're not letting them get away with this, not a chance." She looked at me firm and focused. "I'm a paralegal, Tina. I know people. I know the system. We're going to fight back." Ethan pulled me into a hug that nearly broke me in the best way. "You're safe now, Mom. I promise. They won't hurt you again." And I cried. Not because I was broken, but because, for the first time in years, I felt whole. I wasn't alone anymore. Claire got to work right away. Phone calls, emails, planning. She was a woman on a mission. Ethan made me tea and kept sitting next to me like I might vanish if he let go. That night, something changed in me. Something old and angry and tired finally burned away. I had a spark again, a reason to fight. The next morning, we went back to the house I used to call home, the house they tried to turn into a prison. Ethan stood tall beside me, his hand in mine. Claire handed me a small recording device. "Keep this on you," she whispered. "Record everything, words, threats, orders. It's all evidence." I nodded, slipping it into the pocket of my robe right next to my heart. Ethan knocked hard on the door. The sound echoed like a war drum. When it opened, Marcus was there. His face curled into a sneer. "Well, well, look who came crawling back," he spat. "Shame you didn't freeze to death out there." His words sliced through me, but I stood still. Claire's voice echoed in my mind. "Document everything." "I've come to collect my belongings," I said, steady as I could. He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Your belongings? This is my house now. But fine, take your junk and get out. Not before you finish your chores, though." I blinked. "Chores?" "Yeah, you heard me." He turned and walked away, already barking new orders like I was a maid. Ethan leaned close. "Just go along for now, Mom. We're recording everything." And so I did. I scrubbed floors. I cleaned up after their dog. I folded their laundry with hands that used to rock Marcus to sleep. Every insult, every cruel laugh. The recorder caught it all. Lauren barely said a word, but her smirk said enough. At one point, I was lifting a heavy box. Marcus suddenly grabbed my wrist, hard. "Hurry up, you useless old hag, or do you need another lesson in respect?" His face was so close, I could smell the bitterness on his breath. My whole body tensed. My knees shook, but something deep inside me snapped. "No," I said. He froze. "I'll take my things, and I'll leave, but this isn't over, Marcus, not by a long shot." He blinked, like he didn't recognize me anymore, like the doormat had suddenly stood up. "You think you can threaten me?" he barked. I didn't flinch, I didn't answer, I just looked him dead in the eye. We left that house without looking back. Not because I wasn't tempted to, but because I didn't need to anymore. The fire that had once burned inside that place, my home, my sanctuary, was gone. But now there was another fire, one inside me, one that wouldn't burn out. Claire handed the recorder to a contact of hers later that day. They backed it up immediately. Everything Marcus said, every threat, every insult, every moment I was treated like a burden. It was all on tape, and now we had proof. That evening, Claire introduced us to a woman named Samantha Wilkins. Sharp, direct, not the kind to sugarcoat things. She was a lawyer Claire had worked with before, and the moment I walked into her office, she looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to make this right." We sat down, and I told her everything, again. Only this time, I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I didn't hold back. I let it all out, from the isolation to the fear, from the stolen belongings to the broken trust. Ethan held my hand the whole time. Claire nodded, encouraging me to speak. When I finished, there was silence for a moment. Miss Wilkins tapped her pen against the desk. "This is elder abuse. Plain and simple. And with the recordings you've got, we have a very strong case. What they did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal." I nodded, but deep down I felt a tremor of guilt. Marcus was still my son, my flesh and blood. Could I really drag him through court? Could I live with that? Ethan noticed. He squeezed my hand gently. "Mom," he said softly, "you've spent your whole life protecting others. It's time to protect yourself. No more turning the other cheek." Claire added, "You gave him chance after chance. He made his choice." Miss Wilkins leaned forward. "Tina, you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for every woman who's ever been silenced in her own home." And in that moment, I felt it again. That flicker of strength. Like I was slowly remembering who I used to be before all the fear set in. "What could happen to them?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Depending on how the judge sees it, jail time. Fines. They'll lose any claim to your estate. They'll be forced to repay what they've taken." I took a deep breath. "Good, let's move forward." Ethan beamed. "That's my mom." In the weeks that followed, our legal team worked non-stop. Claire was incredible, digging into paperwork, tracking down witnesses, piecing together every puzzle Marcus had tried to hide. Ethan handled logistics. He helped me sort through old documents, bank statements, even photos Marcus had tried to erase from our family history. And me? I showed up. I spoke up. I did the hard work of letting go of guilt and standing firm in truth. One day, Claire came rushing into the house, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. "I found something," she said, breathless. "Something big." We gathered at the kitchen table as she spread out financial documents, bank accounts, credit cards, personal loans. Miss Wilkins joined us on speakerphone as we laid it all out. "These," Claire said, "show years of reckless spending. Luxury vacations, gambling, shopping sprees, all while they were living off you." My head spun. I looked at the numbers. Massive debt, overdue payments, withdrawals from joint accounts I didn't even know existed. Miss Wilkins' voice was like ice. He wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. He was drowning in his own mess, and he saw your money as a lifeline. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. He used her. He used my mom as a backup plan, a bank. I sat there, staring at the pages. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time, from rage. All those nights I spent wondering what I did wrong, all those times I blamed myself for being a burden. And it was all a lie. Marcus wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to bleed me dry. Something inside me shifted permanently that day. Any little piece of maternal guilt left in me dissolved. He had chosen this path, and now he'd walk it alone. As the court date approached, I grew stronger. Not physically. I still moved slow some mornings, but inside. I found my spine again, my voice. We gathered witness statements, neighbors who had heard shouting, friends who had seen the bruises on my wrist, a local pharmacist who remembered Lauren denying me my own medication because she thought I didn't need it. Every piece added to the puzzle. Every thread led back to Marcus and Lauren. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the wind rustle the trees outside. Ethan came downstairs and stood beside me. "You nervous?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, but I'm ready." He smiled. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Claire joined us, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "Tina, I want you to remember something." "What's that?" "You already won." I looked at her, confused. You stood up. You said no more. And whatever happens in court tomorrow, that's something they can never take away from you." That night I fell asleep with a quiet confidence humming in my chest. The next morning we walked into the courthouse. The hallway smelled like coffee and nerves. The benches were filled with people waiting for their cases. But I didn't look at them. I looked straight ahead. Marcus and Lauren were already in the courtroom when we arrived. They sat at the defense table like nothing was wrong. Lauren wore pearls. Marcus wore smugness like a second skin. But I saw it. I saw the flicker in Marcus's eyes when he noticed me. I saw the tension in Lauren's shoulders when Claire walked in beside me. Miss Wilkins didn't waste time. Her opening statement was strong, clear. She told my story with dignity and force. When the audio recording played, the courtroom went still. "Hurry up, you useless old hag, or do you need another lesson in respect?" The words echoed through the room like a slap. I didn't flinch. I looked right at Marcus. He went pale. And it was only the beginning. The courtroom felt like a movie set. Bright lights overhead, a judge in long black robes, reporters whispering in the gallery. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, and the people who had tried to ruin it were finally about to face the consequences. Marcus sat stiffly at the defense table, arms crossed, his mouth drawn into a thin line. Lauren barely looked at me. Her eyes darted from person to person, like she was already planning her next move. But I didn't care what they were thinking anymore. This was my moment. Miss Wilkins stood confidently as she called witness after witness. One by one, they told the truth. A neighbor testified that she heard yelling almost every night. Another recalled seeing me, red-faced and trembling, standing outside in the cold after Marcus had slammed the door in my face. Then came the expert testimony. A financial investigator broke down Marcus's spending, designer clothes, travel, online gambling, and how he'd siphoned money from accounts that were in both our names. Ethan sat next to me, his hand on my back the entire time. Claire took notes, her eyes sharp as glass. They were my anchors in that storm of a courtroom. The audio recordings were hard to hear, not just for the jury, but for me. Hearing Marcus call me names, threaten me, reduce me to a thing in my own home, it sent chills down my spine. But I didn't cry. Not anymore. This was truth, and truth deserved to be heard. Marcus's lawyer tried to spin it all, of course. He said I was confused, that I had memory issues, that I misunderstood my son's intentions. But then came the cross-examination. The prosecutor leaned forward, voice calm and cutting. "So let me get this straight, Mr. Wilson. You systematically isolated your mother. You denied her access to her belongings. You insulted her. You burned her things, and all while using her money to cover your own debts?" Marcus shifted in his seat, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "That's not what happened." "Oh? Then what did happen? Why do the bank statements show thousands in withdrawals for non-essential purchases? Why is your voice on multiple recordings threatening her?" He was sweating now. I was protecting her, he said. "She's old. She doesn't know how to handle her finances." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "You mean the finances that kept you afloat? The ones you used to pay for a trip to Las Vegas?" The room held its breath. Marcus snapped. "You don't know anything about our family." His voice echoed, harsh, ugly, raw. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court!" Lauren kept her head down the whole time, but the damage was done. Every lie they tried to tell fell apart. And when I took the stand, yes, I did, they couldn't stop me. I spoke with the same voice that once sang lullabies to Marcus. The voice that used to say, "I love you," every night before bed. That voice was still mine, and I used it. "I didn't want to believe my son could do this to me," I said, my voice steady. "But he did, and now I want justice." When I stepped down, I felt 20 pounds lighter. The judge announced he would deliver the verdict the next morning. That night, we barely slept, but we didn't need to. We already knew what was coming. And when we walked into the courtroom the next day, everything was still, calm, final. The judge looked right at Marcus and Lauren. "In light of the overwhelming evidence," he said, his voice clear and deliberate, "this court finds the defendants, Marcus Wilson and Lauren Wilson, guilty on all counts." There was a gasp, maybe from the reporters, maybe from Lauren herself. I didn't know. I didn't care. My eyes stayed on Marcus. He didn't look angry. He looked scared. The judge continued, "Marcus Wilson, your actions were a gross violation of trust, driven by selfishness and entitlement. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay restitution to your mother." Marcus leapt to his feet. "You can't do this to me!" he screamed. The bailiffs moved in. He resisted. For a moment, I saw the same rage in his eyes I had seen in my home, but this time, it didn't scare me, not anymore. He was taken away in handcuffs. Justice had spoken. The judge turned to Lauren. You may not have been the mastermind, Mrs. Wilson, but your complicity makes you equally responsible. You are sentenced to 3 years in prison and 2 years probation. All assets acquired through fraudulent means will be returned. Lauren said nothing. She just sat there, hands trembling, her face drained of color. And I just breathed. For the first time in a very long time, I could breathe. Ethan hugged me in the hallway. Claire wiped a tear from her cheek. You did it, Tina, she whispered. You stood up and fought. I nodded, and I'm never going back. We stepped out into the sunlight. The weight that had hung over me for years lifted. That courtroom wasn't just a place of justice. It was a place of rebirth. I wasn't Marcus's victim anymore. I was Tina. I was free. The days after the verdict passed in a blur, not because I was lost in confusion or grief, but because, for the first time in years, I felt light. Marcus and Lauren were ordered to vacate my home immediately. The court handed down that ruling like a hammer, and with each passing hour, their hold on my life unraveled. Ethan helped me pack up what little they had left behind. Claire stayed on top of the paperwork. They were my constant, my shield, my peace. And when the last box was loaded onto the moving truck, I stood in the doorway of my house and finally breathed in the silence. But it wasn't a heavy silence, it was peaceful. It was mine. Ethan turned to me, smiling with tears in his eyes. The ghosts are gone, Mom, he whispered. This house is yours again. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My throat burned, but not from sadness. From relief. I was back. We spent the next few weeks reclaiming the space, room by room, drawer by drawer. Every corner that once held Lauren's smug perfume or Marcus's heavy boots, we wiped clean. We painted the walls, replaced furniture. Claire brought flowers. Ethan hung photos of me and my late husband, Will, photos Marcus had tried to erase. But Will was back. His smile lit up the hallway again. His memory breathed through every frame and every story I shared with my grandchildren. Laughter returned to the house, and so did love. Ethan and Claire came over often, sometimes just for tea, sometimes with the kids. The sound of their giggles running through the living room was better than any medicine. That noise used to be silence. That silence used to be fear, but not anymore. I started seeing a therapist, Claire's idea. I'll admit I was hesitant at first. I thought, I'm too old for this. Talking won't change anything. But I went anyway, and it helped. I unpacked things I didn't even know I was carrying. Shame, guilt, that nagging voice that said I let this happen. But slowly those thoughts faded. I realized something powerful. I didn't deserve any of it. I was a mother who loved too much, who gave too much, and maybe who stayed too long in a place that no longer loved her back. But now I was a woman who chose herself. And that changed everything. Word spread quickly about what had happened. Neighbors dropped by with baked goods and hugs. Women my age pulled me aside in the grocery store, eyes wide with quiet admiration. You're so brave, they'd whisper. I wish I could do what you did. And I'd say the same thing every time. You can. You absolutely can. Because the truth is, bravery doesn't always look like standing in a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like leaving. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. Sometimes it looks like saying, no more, even if your voice shakes. News of Marcus and Lauren's legal situation trickled in. The sentence stuck. No appeals, no deals. The judge made sure of that. Claire kept me updated. She didn't gloat, though I wouldn't have blamed her. She just made sure I knew that justice was continuing to work, even after the headlines faded. They're getting what they deserve, she said one evening, sipping tea across the table. And then some. I nodded, feeling that same quiet satisfaction bloom in my chest. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And truth had finally won. With each passing day, the house felt more like home. Not just because the walls were freshly painted, or because the furniture was different, but because it was filled with people who loved me, people who respected me, and because I loved myself again. That might sound strange, but I'll be honest, after years of being dismissed, insulted, ignored, it's easy to forget you're worth anything. But I remembered. Every morning when I sipped my coffee in the sunroom, every time I heard my grandchildren's footsteps on the porch, every time I laughed so hard I snorted, I remembered. I was still here, still standing, still Tina. The kids started calling me Grand T. Claire said it made me sound like a superhero. Maybe I was one. One night we had a small dinner party, just family and a few close friends. Claire cooked, Ethan grilled. I made my famous peach cobbler. Halfway through dessert, Ethan raised his glass. "To Mom," he said, "for reminding us what strength really looks like." Everyone clinked glasses. I blinked back tears. "I wasn't always strong," I admitted, "but I had you, and that gave me the strength to become who I was meant to be." Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "We love you, Tina." That night, after everyone went home, I sat in the living room, looking around. There were fresh flowers on the table, children's drawings on the fridge, a candle flickering in the corner. Home. Not a battlefield anymore. A sanctuary. My sanctuary. And as I sat there, I realized something even deeper. Something that had been growing in me like a seed ever since I left that courtroom. I had forgiven myself. Not Marcus, not Lauren, no. That was between them and whatever higher power they'd have to face. But me? I had finally let go of the guilt. The guilt for staying too long. The guilt for being too trusting. The guilt for loving someone who didn't love me back the right way. I forgave Tina because she survived, because she fought, because she never gave up, and because now she was free. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. Life will always have its storms. But I do know this. I am not afraid anymore. Not of being alone. Not of speaking up. Not of choosing myself. I'm Tina Turner. And this is just the beginning.